Hello, greetings everybody. Welcome back to Kenny's cavalcade of collectibles. Right, those of you who subscribe or have an interest in the subject might remember that a few weeks ago I did a video that covered my collection of Marvel comics in hardback. Now, while I realise that comic videos are never going to be as popular as, say, games or Blu-ray movies, whatever, steelbooks. It's my intention to cover all aspects of collecting, or at least my collecting life. So here we are. Now today, having done, as I say, Marvel last time, I'm going to close the circle by covering DC Comics hardbacks and the independents. A bit more about those later. So anyway, DC. Although I'm not a DC fanboy as such, I must admit, of the two major companies, Marvel and DC, I do have a preference for DC, but that's purely because when I first came into comics as a young boy, many moons ago, DC were the only comics available, because DC started back in about ~54, I think, after what happened in the early '50s, which I'll talk again a bit about later. But around about 1956-7, when I came into it, DC were literally, apart from some English stuff like Captain Marvel and all that sort of stuff. Sorry, Marvel Man, not Captain Marvel Man. DC were just about it when it came to comics. So I grew up with them, and the characters of Batman, Superman, Green Lantern, Flash became more synonymous with comics to me than the later Avengers, Captain Americas, and Iron Man, and what have you. So I do. As I say, I do have a slight bias towards DC, but that's by the by. Now, of course, DC began as a superhero publisher back in 1939, I believe it was, with the two of their flagship characters, Superman and Batman, that didn't start off in their own titles at all. As any of you historians know, Superman came with Action Comics 1, I think it was, followed by Detective Comics 27, which I can show you the cover there. These were late 30s, as I say, and they kind of had the run of the field, if you like, because there wasn't too much competition for them, and gradually they introduced sort of like other characters like the Flash and what have you, became popular. And DC ruled the roost for quite many years, until Marvel published Fantastic Four 1 in 1961, when things got a bit different, to say the least. So anyway, that's enough of the history lesson for now. We'll kick off with probably my favourite DC character. This particular series of hardbacks, there's quite a few of them now. They cover a broad spectrum, but they're the archive editions that cover a broad spectrum of characters. I think this was the first one I ever bought, and it's basically these are sort of like high quality reprints of the early titles, which you couldn't buy because they're silly money. And so you have them in these very, very nicely done hardbacks. They are quality hardbacks. You can feel that just by picking them up. They just feel solid. So that one covers the first 4 issues of Detective Comics that Batman was in, and you can see I love this image of the Batman here, with the big ears and the sort of like portents of doom. I love those. I mean, you know, we very soon got down to the Batman we recognise today, but those first couple of issues were a completely different looking Batman. Which I mean, they have redesigned the costume over the years, and they did try that look, but obviously it didn't prove popular because it didn't last for too long. But yeah, as I say, that I'll just give you a look. You know, they're very high quality. If you were to see the original comics, you know, you wouldn't hardly recognise these images because they're all cleaned up and beautifully printed. So to say that was oh sorry, I'm totally wrong on that one. That was actually the first 24. I didn't think Batman had come to look like that that early on, but a lot of these are like 4. But of course, with it just being an 8-page or whatever story in Detective, they managed to squeeze 24 issues in there. So that was that, and that's the second volume, which goes from Detective 51 to 70. The second volume, and I have the third volume. This is as far as I go. This one is Detective 71 to 86. This is where Batman is in his more familiar costume, and good old Joker there. Whatever. So that's the first 3 volumes of the Batman archives. These were quite expensive when they came out. I don't know what the prices are like these days, but they were expensive at the time. I bought those Batman ones new, but a lot of these other ones I managed to pick up second hand in good condition. And then this was the Dark Knight archive editions, and these were the actual Batman comics. So as I say, that one is what I was talking about, the 4 issues, because obviously that was a whole comic full of Batman. So it was a thicker comic, and they've got 4 issues in the first edition, the first volume, and that's the only one that I've managed to get so far. Because I say, you need a few bob if you want to buy them new, and find them second hand is a bit tricky, to be quite honest. Not that they're rare or anything, but they're scarce-ish in sort of like in good money, if you like, to find them in of a good price. And then they did the Superman. I haven't actually got any of the Action Comics volumes. These are the actual ones that reprinted the actual Superman comic, which came a bit later. There again, you've got issues 1 to 4. I'm missing volume 2. That's number 3, which covers 9 to 12. And then one of the other characters that, again, he didn't come along in his own. Well, the modern version of him, at least, didn't come along in his own comic. He started out in a comic called Showcase back in the early 60s. That's the volume 1, which covers the Showcase edition. That's a lovely cover, that one. I actually used to have that comic. It's a beautiful cover. And then that's your Green Lantern number 1 there, and that's reprinting of the Showcase appearances, and then several issues of the comic itself. Excuse me, frog. So that was volume 1, and then I have volume 4, which covers issues 22 to 29, and then we have volume 6, which covers some later issues 39 to 47. So that was those. Now, probably one of the most famous supergroups, apart from the Avengers, of course, would be the Justice League of America. This came out early 60s, might have been 1960, 61, can't remember offhand. There again, didn't start off in its own title. It started off as the Brave and the Bold there, which you can see at the top. That was the first issue of the Brave and the Bold, and then graduated into their own title after about 3 issues of the Brave and Bold, I think it was. I mean, Brave and Bold and Showcase, which Green Lantern started in, they're basically just look like trial comics, just to give them a sort of like a 2 or 3 issue trial run, and if they sold well, then they migrated into their own title. I only have the first volume of Justice League. Now, the rest of the ones I have are old 1930s titles, which obviously are nice to have because you wouldn't see them apart from this. This was the original Justice. This was actually the Justice Society of America, which was the old Justice League in effect, and it had familiar characters like there's your Green Lantern and the Flash, Dr. Fate. I think that's the Atom, Spectre, Hawk Man, and these were like the Golden Age versions of the characters. So these ran through the 30s and the 40s, late 30s and the 40s, early 50s until the Comics Code came about. So that's it started off in All Star number 3, and that one covers 3 to 6. So there again, there's 4 issues there. That's the second volume. There, and number 3 covers 11 to issues 11 to 14. See Wonder Woman there. All of these characters are familiar. These are just the old versions of them, and then I have up to number 4, which is 15 to 18, issues 15 to 18. Might be worth mentioning that these, if you could find the original comics that these are reprinted from, you'd need a few quid. Thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands probably. Right, this was the Golden Age Green Lantern. This was a different character altogether. He wasn't Hal Jordan that you might know from the newer DC versions of Green Lantern. This was a character called Alan Scott. Snazzy costume, I have to say. And that covers, he started out in All American Comics, which you get 30 issues, 31 to 38, and then numbers 2 to 3 of Green Lantern Quarterly, to which he migrated. And then this is a more obscure supergroup from the 30s, the Seven Soldiers of Victory. They were actually resurrected by, I think, Grant Morrison about 9 or 10 years ago. But these came in a title called Leading Comics, as you can see there, of which we have issues 5 to 8. So there again, it's another 4 issues. And last but not least of these archive editions I have to show you, we have Adam Strange. Now, this is a character that's never managed to sustain a decent run in his own comics. This particular volume is, again, he started out in Showcase there, the same as Green Lantern, and then moved into a title called Mystery in Space. Now, I had a few of these before I sold a lot of my collection, and really lovely comics. I mean, they were beautiful covers, the colouring, these purples, and a lot of them were drawn by an artist called Carmine Infantino, and really some outstanding artwork in those. You know, really lovely. Yeah, Mystery in Space was one, apart from the superhero titles, was one of my favourite comics from the 60s. So that was the archive editions. Now, I don't have, unlike the Marvels, which, you know, I've collected because, as I said to you last time, I've got a remaindered store near me that knocks them out cheaply. I haven't managed to collect too many more DC comics, but I'll show you the ones that I do have. Right, this is a more modern. This is only a few years old, this title, and it's done by Jay Lee, who's, well, some of the artwork is in I think in this volume, which covers issues 1 to 4 and Justice League 23.1. I think all of these were drawn by Jay Lee, and I'm just mesmerised by this guy's art. He just does some beautiful stuff, you know. Yeah, I'm pretty certain that all of these are by he. Really outstanding imagery, and I can get the light off it. Yeah, I love this guy. I've picked up the first couple of volumes because he did most of the art in those first couple. Again, that's issue 2, which I bought on eBay, or was it Amazon, for a couple of quid, or it wasn't very dear anyway, at £5 or something. There again, yeah, so some of it's not Jay Lee, but most of it is. The cover there certainly is. Yeah, he's an artist that I admire greatly. I'm quite happy to have those in hardcover. Now, about 10 years ago, 8, 9, 10 years ago, it was the fashion at Marvel and DC to do these sort of like events, epic storylines where all the comics crossed over and all the comics had the storyline running through them. You know, it was a good way to sell comics, I suppose, if you were a continuity buff or you just collected all of the event comics. I mean, there have been many events in the past, say 10 or so years. Civil War, you know, you probably recognise as an event at Marvel, but this was the major. Well, it's not one of the major. I would say it's probably the best, in my opinion, of all of the events, and this was. This involved the Black Lanterns. The storyline built up slowly over several months, where they introduced you to different factions of Green Lantern corps, where you had originally, obviously, the Green Lanterns were the good guys. You had the Red Lanterns, Orange Lanterns, the Black Lanterns, these led by this guy, and Sinestro, who was the major Green Lantern villain. He had his own corps of yellow lanterns, as I remember, and there was this big, long, convoluted storyline where Black Hand aligned himself with some villain in the DC universe and resurrected all the dead people. You know, it was like a zombie apocalypse. But really good stuff. The core title was interesting. Yeah, and that was just one of the volumes that they brought out. There's many of them. I wish I could find a few more. Okay, these next ones I'm going to show you from a series that DC started called Elseworlds. It tells you on the back there. Easy to read it. Elseworlds heroes are taken from their usual settings and put into strange times and places. Some that existed or might have existed, and others that can't, couldn't, or shouldn't exist. The result is stories that make characters who were as familiar as yesterday seem as fresh as tomorrow. So DC decided that might be a good marketing ploy, and these were the what became known as the Batman vampire stories. Now these were drawn by an artist who, in my opinion, is vastly underrated, Kelly Jones. Not very well known to a lot of comic book aficionados, but he has a very distinctive art style. And DC did 4 of these volumes. That's the Red Rain. I followed that up with Bloodstorm, and Crimson Mist. This one's an absolute annoyance to me, I should say, because of the 4 volumes, I'll just put that down, show the last one first. That was the Joker story that completed the 4 volumes. That one I just showed you last of all there is I'll show you the spines there. They're all DC comics except that one, which as you can see is Titan Books. Now the 4 DC comics are all first printings, so they're the very first printing of the hardback. But the Titan one is the publishing arm of Forbidden Planet. The people who sell, comic books and figurines and stuff, and that's just a reprint. So I'm not the OCD in me is not happy to have 3 out of the 4 as first printings and the other one as a reprint. But some you win, you can't have everything. Okay, now this probably my favourite graphic novel of all time. Arkham Asylum, Serious House on Serious Earth, I think the subtitle is. Yeah, got that right. It's a bit hard to see. Yeah, it was written by Grant Morrison and illustrated by a guy you don't see often enough in comics. He's done a lot of covers, Dave McKean, but really knocked this one out of the park. The artwork is so atmospheric, and the storyline basically involves the Batman going into Arkham Asylum where the Joker's taken hostages, and it's a kind of a look at the strange relationship between Batman and the Joker, and then all of the other villains that's in Arkham turn up at some point, Killer Croc and stuff like this. And it really is an outstanding piece of writing and artwork, in my opinion. The 2 merged together just turn it into a totally outstanding graphic novel. And I did an updated version of it, which I'll have to get, like an anniversary edition. But that's the original first printing of that. This one, I don't know. Enemy Ace was one of those characters that kind of appeared in an anthology title and then never really sort of made it. But the reason I picked this one up is because the artist George Pratt. There again, I'm not seeing a lot of his work in comics, but he just has this ethereal sort of style of artwork. It's so unlike most of the other styles I've seen. I'll just show you a couple of examples there. Really nice stuff, and it's a nice looking volume as well. So I picked that up somewhere along the way. That's just an oddity I have in there. Right, here's my favourite DC character. The one about the Batman and Superman. Shadow, he's your boy. Still going strong in Dynamite Comics. I've been doing a lot of Shadow Comics. Basically what that is, in the 70s, DC decided to resurrect the character from his old 30s and 40s pulp days. Really a brilliant comic drawn by Michael Kaluta, as you can see at the bottom there. One of my favourite comic artists, along with Jay Lee. They did 5 issues, 1 to 4, missed 5, and then did number 6, and that collects those 5 issues. Plus, there's actually a new story in there written just for that volume, so it's not just all reprint. The inker on a lot of them was Bernie Wrightson, who's another favourite of mine. So you had a penciler and an inker, both of whom were particular favourites and a character who I love. So that's one of my nicest DC volumes. I'll just give you a quick look at some of the artwork in there. As again, it's been, find a decent page to show you. It's been cleaned up from the original comics. Really nice stuff. So I like that one. This is just an oddity that I picked up for no reason other than it's Grant Morrison again. Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely sort of like teamed up on a lot of comic books recently, well, in the last, say, 10 years to date, and they became very much fan favourites, especially when they worked together. And that is just story of Earth 2, which is the characters that we know, Wonder Woman, Superman, Batman, in a slightly different setting. I think it's an alternate reality. So that was that one. And then this one is a character that never liked Shazam, Captain Marvel, whatever. I only picked that one up because I saw it in a charity shop for a couple of quid and thought, DC hardback, yeah, why not? So, yeah, that was that one. Won't dwell on that one too long. And this was, as far as I know, this was Batman Digital Justice. It just, it does what it says. It's not a normal pencil and ink job. It's a digitally produced comic. I think that was the first digital comic, I'm not sure. Totally computer generated. I picked it up for no other reason than it was just something a bit different, and also it's the Batman, so yeah. Digital Justice, weird stuff. And then the last of the DCs, this was Vertigo, The Fountain. It was a film with Hugh Jackman, and this particular novelisation of it was drawn by Kent Williams, who's another excellent artist. Just basically an adaptation of the film. I'll show you a couple of pages there. On the back of it. He's painted stuff on the back there. So, yeah, I just picked that one up because again it was what was it, £3 in the charity shop. Originally it would have been $40, so that would have cost you thick end of 30 quid if you bought it new. Okay, so that's it for DC now. We move on now to the independent publishers. In the very beginning of the independent movement, you had comics that came out as kind of an antidote, if you like, an alternative to the DC and Marvel superhero comics. And back in the, I don't know when Undergrounds first started, maybe, I don't know, late 60s. Yeah, as I say, they were known as Undergrounds, and you'll probably recognise some of the major exponents of the underground comics. If I said Robert Crumb, Richard Corbin, these are all fairly well respected artist. And yeah, the underground comics were just, as I say, there were a lot of it was comedy stuff, and just as I say, printed as on black and white, in black and white as an alternative to the crash and bang of the superheroes. And then when the underground sort of like found a readership, a few people decided that maybe we could start publishing our own titles in, under our own banners. So then you got Pacific Comics, Eclipse Comics, and then more famously Image Comics. Spawn, Todd McFarlane's Spawn. I mean, they became very, very popular, and suddenly DC and Marvel found their dominance challenged, and they had to fight for their corner of the market. And so, I mean, now obviously there's probably far more independent comics come out each week than there are Marvel and DC put together. But that was basically the start of the independent comic movement, and then that was all helped by comic shops springing up. You didn't have to go to the newsagent to buy comics anymore. You could go to a proper comic dealer, comic retailer. And so it was that we got stuff like this. Now this, as I explained to you when I spoke about the Marvel reprints of these Miracleman titles, this started out as Marvel Man in an English magazine called Warrior, until Warrior got a cease and desist notice from Marvel, and they had to change the title to Miracleman because obviously Marvel Man was no good. At least to Marvel it wasn't. And this was a hardcover reprinting of the Eclipse reprints of the Warrior stories, which originally came out in black and white. Eclipse did them in colour, and this is a hardback reprinting. This is the first volume, which covers the first, half a dozen issues. And this is probably one of the scarcest and probably most expensive books I own. I've seen prices of £100 or more, depending. I mean, it's probably not quite so valuable now that the stuff's finally come out of legal limbo and been properly reprinted by Marvel. Ironically, as I said last time. But yeah, that's basically a hardcover reprint of the Eclipse reprints. Probably should have covered this in the Marvel, because this was done by a Marvel comic publishing imprint. But martial law, it was actually not published by any of the major companies. It was done by a publisher called Graffiti Designs, who specialised in signer numbers editions. This was signer numbered. This is Pat Mills and Kevin O'Neill, which you probably remember from 2000 AD. And this is a signed and numbered limited edition of 1500, which this is number 350, and there's the signatures as well. That was one of the very earliest graphic novels I ever bought. So that was that. This is an interesting one, in as much as it's a hardback original graphic novel. Now the Spider, any of you know about pulps might know about the Spider. He was a competitor for the Shadow, Doc Savage. Characters like this way back in the 30s, 40s. And this particular one was actually, I believe it was done from the pencils. An artist called Gene Colan did that one, and it was written by Don McGregor, who was a very, very popular writer for Marvel in the 70s. And it was just an original graphic novel that resurrected one of the old pulp characters. Okay, now these next half a dozen I'm going to show you are, I'll just get them in order, show them properly in order. Kabuki. This was, I mentioned Image Comics earlier as one of the major independents to challenge Marvel and DC. This was a title that came out, and all of the stories have been reprinted in 6 very handsome hardbacks. I have all 6, fortunately. And these were done by an artist called David Mack. This one is predominantly, well, it's all black and white. Trying to find you a good example there. There's an example of David Mack's style, and I just bought these because they're so beautifully drawn, and they're so the actual books, they're lovely books with beautiful covers, so that's why I picked those up. So that was volume 1 and volume 2. That's number 3. I mean, just lovely artwork. And that one's a bit more sombre. And then we have volume 5. And last but not least, a very lovely cover, volume 6. So these are all black and whites, although they were done in colour a bit later, as I remember. So there we have it. I'll just move some stuff so I have a room to show you more. Okay, now I mentioned Richard Corbin as one of the mainstays of the underground movement, and those of you who saw the last video remember that I showed that, even though it's not published by Marvel. I showed that as an example of what is probably the first hardback graphic novel. Some debate about it, as I said then, but I think it's generally accepted that that's the first Blood Star by Richard Corbin. I seem to remember this came in again it's a numbered edition, 2215 of 5000, and I seem to remember it coming in a slipcase. So God knows what I've done with the slipcase. But yeah, that was just a series of reprints of underground comics that Richard Corbin did. Now, if you're going to talk about people who've been influential in the comics book genre, you would always mention Will Eisner. Probably most people know him from the Spirit comics, or the Spirit newspaper strips originally that became comics later on. I mean, this guy is so revered. He almost transcends comic books. This particular volume is apart from the Arkham Asylum that I showed you earlier, is probably one of my favourite graphic novels next to that. It's a beautiful volume. Basically, I'll just read the back here to you to give you just a feeling of what it is. In this deeply felt and moving chronicle of a city building and the people whose lives centre on it, Will Eisner explores the collective psychic memory a landmark leaves behind when it is destroyed. That's basically it. It's what the characters do when this building is destroyed, and it's it's not your normal comic book fare, but it's a really moving, touching, and lovely story. And I urge any of you who are capable of getting a copy of this to get one, because it's wonderful. There again, it's got a signed tip plate. It's signed and numbered there. Number 107 of just £12.50. So that one's not one you're going to find around too often. That's another series he did called City People, very similar to the building. That's just a notebook. That's not the actual city building volume. And then I have a few volumes of the Spirit. He did these. These have all been coloured. These are from the Warren Spirit Stories that came in the large format books in the, I don't know, late 70s, early 80s. That's the second volume, and we have volume 1. Now, of course, comic books go way back beyond 1939 of DC, and this is probably one of the best examples of comics that you're going to see from the early 1900s, Little Nemo in Slumberland by a very famous artist of the time called Winsor McCay. Now, visually, I admit it's probably something that you would need to get used to after the shall we say the antics of the superhero comics, beat 'em ups and people fist fighting each other. This is like lyrical, almost sort of like Alice in Wonderland stuff. But these were originally, I believe, were newspaper. Oh yes, it says here the 4 colour pages in this volume have been meticulously selected from original files of the New York Herald, and I mean they're big volumes. So I hope you can see that. But I mean the imagery in these books is you have to sit for an hour and just appreciate a few of the pages, because it really is weird stuff. You can see there the bed. Little Nemo. Maybe a lot of people are not familiar with this stuff because, as I say, it's an acquired taste and it's history. But I'm lucky enough to have acquired all 3 volumes. Very nice volumes they are. As I say, they're big format, so the artwork comes over very nicely, especially given that it's from the early 1900s, Now, if you're going to talk about nicely produced books, that's I've sealed this because I wanted to keep it as dust-free as possible, although I haven't done the second volume, so I can show you that. But this is Hellboy, Mike Mignola. This is basically hardcover reprints of the comic books. That's volume 1. I can show you this one a bit better because, as I say, it hasn't been sealed. Now these come in this is felt like, I don't know what they call this in publishing terms, but it feels like felt. And you have a little plate sort of like tipped on there, and then inside you have the reprints of the comic books. I won't open it too much because I don't want to break the spine, but they've done quite a few volumes of these. Dark Horse Books did the original volumes, but really nice stuff, very well drawn. As I say, these come in at $50 each, so you're talking 30 odd quid, but we can get some of them on Amazon a bit cheaper than that, and I should be endeavouring to do so. I've got the first 2 volumes, but I'm sure there are at least 6 by now. Now, this one I should have showed you last time because Epic Comics are an imprint of Marvel, and this is Frank Miller, and it chronicles the so-called resurrection of Elektra after she was killed in that famous storyline by bullseye, and this attempts to resurrect her, if you like. Must admit, it's a story that left me a little bit confused and bemused, but it's all very nice stuff inside. It's a bit of Frank Miller. Yeah, that one. Now, this is a selection of stories by another artist that a lot of people might not be familiar with, Al Williamson. He's one of the old sort of like 1950s artists, and really a great draftsman. I mean, he did some Flash Gordon stuff, which to my mind is outstanding. But this is just a reprint of some of his. Oops, don't want to break the spine. The reprint of some of his better known strips in various comic books. A really nice volume. Now, what we have here. This is Simon Bisley. Some of you might recognise. Another one artist that I like a lot. This is a hardcover reprint of a series of stories he did for Heavy Metal magazine. There were only sort of like eight pages at the time, but they've collected them all here for our edification, and once again, really nice stuff. Okay, now foreign artists. I don't read a lot of foreign comic books, but I have to admit that this guy, Philippe Drouillet, I don't know how you pronounce it, is probably one of the few European artists that I've read. His famous character is a guy called Lone Sloan there. I do have some other volumes, but they're all in paperback, so this is the only hardback I have. Again, this is reprints of his heavy metal work, and yeah, I mean this guy has heavily influenced a lot of comic book artists over the years, and yeah, just another nice volume. Now we talk about, just make a bit of space here because I'm running out of room. Okay, if we talk about legends of the comic book, they don't come any bigger than Frank Frazetta. I mean, obviously more well known for his covers, his paperback covers. He did a lot of covers for the Warren, creepy, eerie stuff like that. But this is a collection of his comic work from the earlier years. He did a lot of work for, well, not a lot of work. We did some work for EC Comics, which I'm going to come to shortly. And although the slip cover's still sealed because I want to keep it clean, I can slip out the volume to just briefly show you. That's one of his covers from EC, from his EC days. There's a few examples there. But basically this is just stuff from the EC Comics, and he did a strip called Thunder. And then there's if you don't know Frazetta, there's an example. Yeah, so basically that's just a compilation of his works from the early years. Around the right way. Right, now I'm going to finish off by showing you some very, very nice volumes. Now, when I mentioned earlier the history of DC Comics, things didn't last for DC, unfortunately, because while their superheroes were flying along, doing very nicely sales-wise, unfortunately, in the early 50s, around about 1953, there was a big swing towards monster comics, and particularly a firm, a publishing house called EC. Now, I've only got the volumes that they did of the science fiction, but they did a lot of horror titles as well. And in I think it was 1953, a chap called Frederick Wertham, he started a witch hunt against EC for their horror comics, claiming they were destroying young brains and frightening kids and what have you. And basically comics kind of stopped for a while because comics just had such a bad press through all of this this negativity and this witch hunt that Wertham started, that the comics kind of became unviable, unsellable, unpublishable, and it led to the Comics Code, which basically was comic books were told to regulate themselves and stop publishing, sort of like the equivalent of video nasties, if you like, in comic book form. And then, so finally in the mid-50s, things quietened down and DC were able to start again. But as I say, these were the culprits, not so much these science fiction titles, which are the only ones I can show you because they're the ones that I was interested in. But basically, a chap called Russ Cochran, publisher, brought out these very handsome slipcase volumes of the weird science fantasy, weird fantasy. That's the volume. They're very, very heavy. I'll just give you a quick look. So yeah, there was 4 volumes in each slipcase. Very, very nicely done, I have to say. I think that's a Frazetta, Frank Frazetta, who I showed you earlier. And so basically they're just reprints of the old EC comics in black and white. But very, very nice volumes. These are all first printings as far as I know. Just get them back in. And they actually, EC, Russ Cochran actually did quite a few of these over the years, and they are quite expensive. And that, as I say, that's the 4-volume Weird Fantasy. That is the 2-volume Weird Science Fantasy. That's Mr. Frazetta again. Actual fact, it's incredible science fiction and weird science fantasy. There were 2 separate titles. Might as well just show you them while we have them here. That's the weird science fantasy. And that's the incredible science fiction. That particular one is Wally Wood, who was a very famous artist from that particular period and a mainstay of EC Comics. I mean, there was some absolutely wonderful artists work for EC Comics. Al Williamson, who I showed you the volume of earlier, Frank Frazetta, Wally Wood, people like this, sort of like giants in the field. And then we have this volume of 4, which is dusty, and a particular annoyance to me in that I don't have the slipcase for them. I don't know what possessed me to buy these without the slipcase, but I did. Weird Science, again, 4 volumes. That was Wally Wood again and Wally Wood again. Feldstein. Nice covers, you know, nice artwork all round, and the Feldstein again. Yeah, so that was those 4 volumes, as I say, minus the slipcase, sadly, but there you go, what can you do? Okay, yeah, so basically that's it for the hardcover comics. So although we didn't have as many DCs as we had Marvels, the quality is certainly higher, in my opinion. Before I close, I'd just like to show you 2 volumes which are not comics, they are comic related. But they're such lovely volumes that while I'm showing you hardcovers, I just have to show you these. Okay, now these are published by Taschen. I've got quite a few of their volumes, and basically these are, I mean, a lovely gold cover there. I mean, I've never seen anything as handsome as these in terms of publishing. I mean, they're really nice volumes, and basically I don't want to open them because I don't want to break the spine or anything like that, but basically they have covers from the old golden age from 1935 to 56, and obviously 1935 to 39 are pre-superheroes, but they do cover that sort of stuff. And then I also have another very, very nice volume here, if I can reach it. Excuse me one moment, it's blinking heavy. Just grab it. Oh, I'm in trouble here. Right, there we are. That's the Silver Age volume, which covers, where are we, 1956 to 1970, so it's all in silver, that one. Just lovely volumes. I mean, these are gorgeous books. There is another volume which I shall be getting very shortly when it comes down a little in price. I mean, originally these were they were expensive. I know that they're about 35 quid when they were published, and I've managed to get them for about half of that, brand new, sealed. There is another volume. I'm just waiting for that to come down a few quid, and we'll be picking that one up. But yeah, I just thought I'd have to show you them because they are the pinnacle of my hard book collection, without a doubt. Okay, well, thanks very much for watching. Next up, I'm hoping to do a video that covers what I have so far amassed for Destiny 2. I know the Destiny video proved to be quite popular, the original one I did on the stuff I managed to pick up for the first Destiny game. Well, I've got a few bits and pieces, so it's not extensive by any means, but there's enough there to warrant a video. So next time you see me, that's probably where we'll be. So, Kenny RH, over and out.